All right, so you wanted to know about sleep paralysis, huh? Well, get ready because this deep dive is pretty fascinating. We're taking a look at this book, Sleep Paralysis, Trapped Between Dreams and Reality. And, well, let me tell you, it's got some really wild stuff in it.
Yeah, this book really goes deep into it. Not just the sciencey stuff, but also how people have thought about sleep paralysis throughout history and across different cultures.
It's crazy to think that something so many people experience, something so, universal, can also feel so personal, you know? So, imagine you wake up one morning and you can't move at all. Your mind is awake, but you're totally stuck. And then you see something in the shadows of your room.
Yeah, that's classic sleep paralysis right there.
Yeah.
And I know the hallucinations can be terrifying, but honestly, just understanding what's going on can help a lot.
Okay, so let's break this down. What's actually happening in our brains when we experience sleep paralysis?
Well, it all starts with something called rematonia.
Remato.
Yeah, it's a natural process that happens during REM sleep. Basically, it's like a safety mechanism. Even when you're dreaming about running a marathon, your body stays perfectly still because of rematonia.
So my body basically has like a built-in pause button when I'm dreaming. That's incredible. But how does that explain sleep paralysis, though?
Think of it this way. Sleep paralysis happens when your mind wakes up from REM sleep, but your body is still kind of stuck in that paused state. Your brain's online, but your body's still snoozing.
Oh, so my mind's ready to start the day, but my body's still hitting the snooze button.
Okay, no wonder people feel so disoriented and scared.
Exactly. And then you throw in those hallucinations. This book actually talks about three main types: the intruder, the incubus, and vestibular motor. And they all tap into our deepest fears.
Ooh, okay. Those sound kind of creepy. Can you give us some more details about these hallucinations from the book? What exactly makes them so scary? Sure, we'll take the intruder hallucination. You might feel like someone's in the room with you, maybe hear footsteps, or even see a shadowy figure. It's really playing with that fear of the unknown.
And the incubus, that one sounds especially freaky.
Oh yeah, it's definitely unsettling. With the incubus, you feel like there's something heavy sitting on your chest, making it hard to breathe. No wonder it's associated with all those stories about demons and stuff.
Wow, it's like our worst fears coming to life in our own bedrooms. What about the vestibular motor type? That's all about movement, right?
Yeah, right. You might feel like you're floating, flying, or even being dragged out of bed. And what's really fascinating is that these hallucinations are connected to our sense of balance and spatial awareness, which, are crucial for survival.
So basically, our brains create these terrifying experiences based on our most primal instincts.
That's the thing. And because your body can't react during sleep paralysis, this feeling of danger just gets amplified. It's like your internal alarm system's going haywire, but you're frozen, unable to do anything.
Okay, I get it, but it all sounds incredibly freaky. So if you find yourself in that situation, what can you actually do about it?
Well, a lot of people try to fight it, but that usually just makes it worse. The trick is to remember that your motor system is temporarily offline. Instead of struggling, the book suggests focusing on your breathing.
Like, just take deep breaths. How does that actually help?
If you take slow, deep breaths, it can actually help regulate your heart rate and calm down that fight or flight response. It's a way of telling your body, hey, everything's okay, time to wake up fully.
Oh, so it's like a gentle nudge to your body. Are there any other tips in the book for snapping out of sleep paralysis?
The book also talks about trying to wiggle just a finger or a toe. It might sound impossible, but sometimes a tiny movement like that can kickstart your muscles into waking up.
Really? A little wiggle can make that much of a difference.
Sometimes, yeah. But honestly, wouldn't it be better to prevent sleep paralysis in the first place?
Oh, yeah, that would be ideal. What does the book say about that?
One of the best things you can do is stick to a regular sleep schedule. Having a consistent sleep-wake cycle really helps regulate your body's natural rhythms. That makes those rematonia glitches a lot less likely.
So basically, no more late-night Netflix binges. Even on weekends, huh?
Well, yeah, consistency is key when it comes to sleep. But even if your schedule's a bit crazy, there's still things you can do. The book also talks about how important it is to have a calming bedtime routine.
So like taking a warm bath or listening to music before bed, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's not just about how much sleep you get, but also the quality of that sleep. And another interesting thing from the book is that your sleep position can actually make a difference. Sleeping on your side might actually be better than sleeping on your back for preventing those episodes.
Wow, so even something as simple as how we lie down can have an impact.
Apparently so. And one more thing. It's also a good idea to limit caffeine and nicotine, especially close to bedtime.
That makes sense. Those things can really mess up your sleep. But it's interesting that we've been talking about sleep paralysis as this scary thing, but the book also mentions how some cultures actually view it in a positive light, right?
Right. They don't see it as a medical problem, but more like a spiritual experience. Some even believe it can be a gateway to lucid dreaming or out-of-body experiences.
Wait, seriously? So what might be terrifying to some is seen as a good thing by others. That's wild.
It really is. And that's what makes sleep paralysis so interesting. There's the science behind it, but then there's also all the cultural and personal meaning that we layer on top of it.
This is already way more than I expected, but I have a feeling there's even more to uncover about this, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We haven't even gotten into the whole global perspective on this
Yeah?
and the universal fears it seems to tap into.
All right, well, I'm hooked. Let's keep going with this. Let's dive deeper into how different cultures see sleep paralysis.
Yeah, you got it. Get ready. It's about to get even more interesting. So, one thing that really struck me as we were looking at all this is how sleep paralysis is something that people have been dealing with for, like, forever. It's not just a modern thing.
Yeah, it's like this shared human experience, this fear of being trapped, helpless, unable to move or speak. It's kind of primal, right?
Exactly. And the book actually had some really interesting examples of how different cultures have interpreted sleep paralysis throughout history. Like in ancient Greece, they believed in this creature called the Mora.
The Mora. Okay, that sounds kind of ominous. What's the story there?
Well, they believed this Mora was like this evil spirit that would sit on people's chests while they slept, giving them nightmares and making it hard to breathe. Sound familiar?
Definitely reminds me of that incubus hallucination we were talking about, that feeling of pressure on the chest and like you can't breathe.
Right. And it's not just the Greeks. In Japan, they have this term for sleep paralysis called kanashibari, which means bound by metal.
Bound by metal? Wow, that's a pretty intense image. Really captures that feeling of being completely stuck.
It does, doesn't it? And what's even more interesting is that the descriptions of the hallucinations are often really similar across different cultures. The feeling of someone else in the room, the trouble breathing, that sensation of floating or being dragged, it comes up again and again no matter where you are in the world.
It makes you wonder, is there something going on in the human brain, some deep-seated evolutionary fear that's being expressed through these experiences? Like maybe it's hardwired into us somehow.
It's a good question. And the book kind of suggests that maybe these shared hallucinations are connected to those really old survival instincts, like the fear of predators lurking in the dark. If you think about it, being paralyzed in the dark would have made our ancestors super vulnerable to attack.
So maybe our brains evolved to like overreact in these situations, even when there's no real danger, like a leftover survival mechanism, just glitching out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even though it's not a fun experience, it does kind of show us how incredible the human brain is,
Right.
how complex and powerful it can be.
Right. And it makes all these cultural interpretations even more fascinating. It's like what might be terrifying to one person is seen as this profound experience by another. It all comes down to how we understand these weird signals our brains are sending us.
And that's what makes this whole topic so interesting. It's not just the science, it's how we make sense of it all. How those interpretations could be so different.
Yeah, totally. And, we've talked a lot about sleep paralysis being the scary, negative thing. But remember how some cultures see it in a totally positive light? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember how we mentioned how some cultures see it as like a doorway to other states of consciousness? Well, the book talks about how it can be linked to lucid dreaming, where you realize you're dreaming and you can actually control the dream.
So instead of freaking out, they're using this weird state to become like masters of their dreams. How does that even work?
Well, think about it. In sleep paralysis, you're already conscious,
Right.
but your body's still in that dream state. So for some people, it's like they're right on the edge of that dream world. They can use that awareness to slip into a lucid dream.
Wow. It's like they found a secret passage into this whole other realm. That's really cool. And what about those out-of-body experiences? How does that connect to sleep paralysis?
This is where things get really interesting. The book explains that sometimes those hallucinations that people have during sleep paralysis, like feeling like they're floating or being pulled, can actually feel like an out-of-body experience.
Because they feel like they're separating from their physical body. Like they think their mind is actually leaving their body.
Right. And even though there's no scientific evidence to say that out-of-body experiences actually happen, that feeling can be super powerful and convincing. I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah, it would definitely make you question what's real and what isn't. It really challenges our understanding of reality?
It does, doesn't it? And it
Yeah.
really highlights how much our own beliefs and experiences shape how we make sense of these things.
It's like what we were saying earlier. What might seem terrifying to one person could be seen as a totally profound, life-changing experience to someone else. It all depends on how we make sense of it, how we interpret those strange signals our brain is giving us.
Totally. And all this talk about cultural interpretations and personal experiences is fascinating, but I think it's time we bring in some hard science. We've explored the historical and cultural perspectives, but what do modern researchers have to say about sleep paralysis?
You're right. Let's see what science can tell us about this ancient phenomenon.
One of the most interesting areas of research right now is the connection between sleep paralysis and other sleep disorders. Studies have shown that people with narcolepsy, that condition where people experience extreme daytime sleepiness, are much more likely to have sleep paralysis too.
So it's not just random. It could actually be a symptom of something else going on.
That's what the research suggests. Researchers are still working on figuring out why that connection exists, but it does point to the idea that there might be some shared underlying brain activity happening with these different sleep issues.
That's a really good point. It shows why it's so important to talk to a doctor if you're having sleep paralysis a lot. It could be a sign of something more serious that needs medical attention.
Absolutely. And beyond the medical side of things, there's also more and more research looking at the psychological and emotional stuff that can contribute to sleep paralysis. Things like stress, anxiety, trauma, they can all play a part.
So it's not just about the physical stuff that happens during sleep, but also about our mental and emotional well-being. It's all connected, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's why taking care of your mental and emotional health is just as important as treating any physical causes.
I'm realizing that this deep dive has really shown us how interconnected our minds and bodies truly are. Sleep paralysis might seem like this bizarre thing that just happens out of nowhere, but it actually tells us so much about how our brains work? Especially when it comes to sleep, dreams, and even how we perceive reality. And honestly, I have to say, I'm a lot less scared of sleep paralysis now. It's still kind of creepy, but it's also incredibly fascinating.
It's like we've peeked behind the curtain of consciousness a little bit, right?
Right.
We've gotten a glimpse into the power and mystery of our own brains. And it's a reminder that our brains can do these incredible things, even when we're fast asleep.
Definitely. Well, I think it's about time we wrap up this deep dive into sleep paralysis. But before we go, let's talk about some key takeaways. Especially for anyone listening who might be dealing with sleep paralysis themselves, what's the most important thing for them to remember?
Well, one of the most important things to remember is that sleep paralysis is way more common than most people think. Millions of people around the world have experienced it, and for the vast majority, it's harmless, even though it can be scary.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's easy to feel alone and scared when it happens, but knowing that other people have gone through it can make a huge difference. What else should people keep in mind?
Well, we've talked about some things that can help, like focusing on your breathing, trying to move a finger or toe, and creating a relaxing sleep routine. Those things can really help to stop an episode from happening and make them happen less often.
So the more you know about what's happening, the less scary it is.
Exactly. And lastly, it's important to try and see the experience differently. Instead of thinking of it as this scary curse, think of it as a window into your own mind. It's a reminder of how incredible your brain is.
I like that. It takes away some of the fear and makes it more about curiosity and wonder.
Exactly. It's like your brain is this whole universe that's creating these vivid, sometimes bizarre experiences. And even though sleep paralysis can be frightening, it also shows us just how complex and amazing the human mind is.
This deep dive has been a really cool journey. We started with fear and mystery, but now we're ending with understanding and even appreciation for this weird phenomenon.
It really has been a fascinating exploration, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
I think they do. So before we say goodbye, I want to leave you with one final thought. The next time you wake up feeling paralyzed, remember, it's not a demon or a ghost. It's your brain creating worlds, and that's pretty amazing, wouldn't you say? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep wondering.